My grandparents 60 years ago lived through the Brown versus Board of Education decision. They were in segregated schools in the South, as was my father. And one of the things that they thought that would happen with that, landmark decision to eliminate separate and unequal schools is that we would eliminate this disparity for generations to come. But we're celebrating the 60th anniversary of that decision this year in 2014. And unfortunately, we do still have two very separate and unequal public school systems in our country, largely along the lines of race and class. And so you find schools like the neighborhood where I grew up in Detroit, where half of the kids in my neighborhood high school dropped out of high school before getting their diploma. And my brother and I are two of the three kids we know of in our entire neighborhood that went on to college. And you'll find schools like the ones where I taught in Compton, where 2/3 of my fifth graders were doing reading and math at a second grade level or below, and some were actually illiterate. You can compare that to schools in wealthier communities who have kids who are going on to college at incredibly high rates and they're flourishing. But the divide is still pretty stark, and it's largely seen around an individual zip code in the neighborhood in which they grow up. Well, there are really two separate, as I said, and unequal public school systems in the country, and the more high-performing school systems tend to be where kids are living in often suburban communities, middle and upper middle class communities. And those kids tend to graduate at very high rates from high school, higher than the national average, and they're going off to college, often very good colleges, again, at disproportionately higher rates than the rest of the country, and certainly at higher rates than kids growing up in poverty. And some of the things you'll see in those high schools are a lot of advanced placement classes, which are really setting kids up at very high levels to be ready for college. So they're taking advanced placement, chemistry, English, and doing well on those exams. And really, I think one of the differentiators is the expectation that we as a society, one could argue, or perhaps even in those schools, the expectations we have for those kids are, of course, these kids are going to college. You would very unlikely have someone come and ask that, really pointed question of, well, is college really for everybody? We're probably asking, too much of all of our kids. That would rarely be said in one of those communities because, again, we expect it. But if you drive 20 miles into the urban areas near that suburban community, you just find a very different story. I mean, some urban public high schools don't have any advanced placement classes. There are no college or career, or very few college and career placement and discussions that happen because, again, the expectation is, gosh, we don't think many of these kids are going to make it into college, and so I don't know if it's, should we not even invest the time, or do we just not want to hurt their feelings to make them feel bad? And that's where you have those conversations of, well, college isn't for everybody, and we certainly know that every single person on the planet isn't going to go on to be a physicist, at MIT, and that's fine. We just think that we shouldn't have two different school systems that are right now de facto deciding for kids and for families who gets the shot to go to Harvard and be that physicist. Poverty plays a huge role in how prepared kids are or aren't when coming to school. And it's not that families in poverty don't care about education, because they do. But when you think about the challenges day to day of a family growing up with really, really significant financial challenges, there's certain things they're not going to have potentially access to, whether it's high quality health care that will ensure their child is healthy and ready to learn every day, basic nutrition that is so important for kids to be prepared to learn. And then also, we talk a lot about early childhood education, and when you have kids who are coming to kindergarten who perhaps have never been in preschool because their parents are working and couldn't afford to send their child to a high quality preschool, and they're coming to kindergarten literally not knowing how to hold a pencil, and they're competing with kids whose parents have been able to send them to phenomenal, wonderful preschool centers, and those kids are coming to kindergarten reading and doing basic math. The disparities exist at the very beginning, and it can be a huge challenge. I've just never, ever met a parent who said, when their kid's born, oh, my goal is for my child to drop out of high school. I mean, it's almost laughable to think that a parent would feel that way, and I just have never met anyone who believes that. And my experience has been 100% that every single parent wants the very best for their child. I mean, it's not just my experience. The research shows that when you ask parents of all backgrounds, they say they want their child to go to college, overwhelmingly so. And I think what we see is that parents often have a different understanding of what it's going to take to get their child college ready, whether it's, reading to your child every night when they're little, or really finding, a quiet, well-organized space for them to do their homework. And sometimes, quite frankly, parents just have so many other things going on in their lives that the things we look at and sort of assume are parental sort of concern, meaning, are they coming to the back-to-school night? Are they coming to the parent-teacher conference? Well, if you have, two jobs and you're trying to make ends meet, taking time off from a job to come to an after-school event at 3 o'clock in the afternoon just isn't going to work for parents who can't take time off, won't get paid, or may get fired. And so there's all these things that I think come into play with our assumptions often about parents in low-income communities, and I think we need to really look beyond that and assume the best about all parents.